Recording in progress.
All right, like a British train, right on time. My name's Ray Moreau with the Southern Waste Information Exchange. I'll moderate this session, which is called Managing Risk at Recycling Facilities. Got a great lineup of expertise and speakers for you this morning. Administrative thing, if you haven't already thought about it or done it, mute your phones. That would be helpful. And how many of you here have been to a recycling facility of some kind, a materials recycling facility, or, all right, a bunch of you. And so I think all of you know that definitely those that have been there know that there are obvious risks involved in operating and managing facilities like that. Today's session is going to focus on fires at these facilities and how to manage that risk. And we've also got a representative to talk about insurance for operators of such facilities. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first speaker. It's David Naughton, and he's with the Acentria insurance company. And his topic is commercial insurance and risk management concerns. I'll turn it over to David.
It's down there. Thank you. Good morning. Just insurance first thing in the morning. God bless y'all. How are you as stoked as we are to be here? This is so cool. Oh, and with the golf tournament being canceled, Gene has authorized me to let you guys know that we can do 3 more hours this afternoon. Yeah, so just let us know how that goes. 2 things real quick. My favorite quote is from Albert Einstein, who the story goes, he was being interviewed years ago, and because he's dead, so it had to be years ago. And they asked him, why are we here? And I always picture somebody with a steno pad and waiting for this big Einstein answer. And his answer was simply to help each other. And I always thought that was just the coolest thing. So my 2 goals today are hopefully let you walk out of here with something that helps and to make you smile at least once or two. So because insurance is confusing and we do it that way on purpose, it's job security for me. We're going to blow through this stuff really quick just to kind of give you an overview of what we're looking at. And then the real meat will be when we get to risk management practices, which is where you can actually turn your insurance program into a profit center if you do it correctly. So let's see, there we go. Different lines of coverage. Every industry has its own vocabulary, and insurance people like to use abbreviations. That was when I started, that was the hardest thing for me. What were all the abbreviations? There's more types of insurance, but those are the ones we'll hit today. Workers' compensation protects your employees for medical injuries and lost wages. You may have heard the term experience mod. We'll talk about that a little bit later. That's your own personal discount or surcharge depending on your loss experience. One of the notes on workers' compensation that you want to make is light duty. One of the biggest mistakes that employers make is not providing light duty for injured employees. General liability, whenever you see the term liability, that's what you do to other people. You or your employees do to other people and their stuff. This guy, that's obviously not his vase that he broke. So, and I'm from the South, so stuff is one of my favorite words. You'll see it a few times. And real and personal property is damage to your stuff. And we're not, see, that was comic relief. We're not getting video. Okay, that's all right. My daughter helped me with this because I'm old and she knows tech. And so she put in these, that's, I guess, from The Office or something, and somebody broke the coffee pot. EDP, computers and electronic telephones, computers, laptops, lab equipment, mass spec, GC, those kind of things. The reason it's important here is because computer coverage covers broader causes of loss than regular property coverage. Humidity, for example, is a covered peril on an EDP policy where normally it's not. So those are the things you want to think about there. Inland marine, contractors equipment, everything from big yellow iron all the way down to tools and equipment. And a lot of people think they're saving money when they don't insure a bunch of the hand tools and things like that until they get a service truck stolen with $30,000 worth of equipment on it. Just something to think about. Installation floater is equipment awaiting installation and being installed. If you get really bored and read these insurance policies, if it's not attached, it's not covered. So that's hence the need for this. And installation floaters also include the cost of labor to go back and replace it when it's done wrong. Builder's risk is buildings under construction. If you're a native of Florida and you've traveled I-4, you know this building. Ocean marine is waterborne property, anything being transported at sea. There are actually different charging schedules for where your product is on board ship. If it's cheaper if it's way down inside than if it's up on top. But you can get coverage for jettison, which is when they toss your stuff overboard to save the ship. Computer fraud and identity theft, cyber liability. This is a huge thing these days. Just ask Target and Citibank and those folks. People think, oh, I don't do that much. In a state with a 3-year statute of responsibility, it works out to be about $900 per file if nobody gets hurt. That's just paying for things like LifeLock and credit checks for 3 years for everybody who got affected. $900 a file blows up pretty quick. Directors and officers, for their actions as regards the operation of the company. This is also where you would put things like employment practices liability, which includes harassment and discrimination. And there's a lot of that going on. The D&O market is blowing up big time with all of the Me Too and all the other things going on. Auto liability, two parts basically to an automobile policy is what happens to your vehicle and what you do to somebody else's vehicle. Let's see. Umbrella coverage is excess layers of liability. Be very aware of the difference between the term umbrella and excess. They are different. A true umbrella is broader coverage than the underlying. So just make sure that you know the difference. Okay, here's where you start to take away things, I hope. The insurance marketplace is going to fluctuate and nobody is big enough to stop that. There's no company big enough to keep it from happening. The goal is to keep you at the bottom side of that wave. And the way you stay at the bottom side of that wave and get the best terms and conditions for your company is to keep your losses down. Because when you have a clean loss record, people fight over you. Competition is a good thing, drives the pricing down and broadens the terms you can negotiate. You start having losses, it'll get to the point where you're lucky to get insurance. So remember that. Okay, risk management, safety. You want to develop a culture of safety at your business. You guys in the recycling industry are pretty big on that. I'm active with ESSPI, and I've never seen an organization more safety focused than the ESSPI folks. This is an experience mod worksheet. And this is where you get your own experience mod. Your experience mod is yours alone. It can be your personal discount or your personal surcharge, depending on your experience. The works on two different factors, frequency and severity. In today's model, at least in the state of Florida, severity is a lot more hurtful than frequency. Although frequency is not great because the carriers think that if you're having a lot of losses, the big one's just coming right around the corner. The hidden costs of these per OSHA are 1 to 3 times. If you have a $50,000 paid loss, the actual cost to you is 3 times that normally. Between slow down work, loss of work, the person, David cuts his finger off on a machine, the guy that replaces David isn't as proficient in that position as he was. And so you've got loss of production, you've got loss of time when the injury happens, and it just goes on from there. So this whole section is focused on let's not have losses in the first place. Hiring process, we've done enough. If you hire correctly and train correctly, it's going to save you money. We really encourage things like background checks, integrity testing, drug testing. Cost of replacing an employee, $15,000 acquisition and training cost is not unusual in today's market. If you're working at a 6% net profit margin, that means $250,000 to the top line just to replace that employee. So it really runs the numbers up very quickly. Well-trained employees increase retention. Make sure that you've got access to things like a learning management system where you can keep them trained up to date. The broker or carrier that you're using should have a very aggressive claims management process. 68-year-old security guard at a transfer station. Transfer stations aren't necessarily in the best part of town. He was shot during a robbery, and the carrier, who shall not be named, CNA, set a huge $200,000 reserve on this guy. And he's 68 years old and he's been shot. He's not coming back to work. It's not going to happen. So we were able to manage the claim and negotiate it down to a $50,000 settlement. Well, that was $150,000 that did not go on the insured's loss ratio. And being shot on the job's a workers' comp claim. So that would have really killed his experience mod. And claims hit your experience mod and they stay for 3 years. And OSHA filters is one of the tools that we use. If people get kind of frightened about OSHA, do I report it? Do I not report it? Do I want? And we have some OSHA filter tools that kind of walk you through, should I report this, should I not? Because you don't want to over report and then OSHA gets upset. But if you don't report, then they get mad at you too. So that's a tool that you can use. The insurance policy is a contract, whether it's your homeowners, your personal auto, anything. I cannot tell you how many times these three words have saved people tens of thousands of dollars. Anytime you ever get a claim denied for any reason, as polite as you feel like being, say, show me where it says that. And an insurance policy is a contract. They need to come back to you and say, hey, Bob, page 5, left-hand side, halfway down, it says. And if they cannot do that, you win. So if you take nothing else out of here today from me, take that, because it will save your life. Okay, so we'll get to those. What did we miss? Okay, we'll do that first. We'll know how the broker system works. A lot of people, it's amazing. I mean, people didn't understand what was going on. The insured is you guys. The broker would be someone like us. And most brokers go to multiple carriers. What people don't understand is the first broker to that carrier owns that market. And where that becomes super important is, what does the broker bring to the table? You've ever had a car that you really loved and you went to a bad mechanic. That's sort of the analogy that you're looking at. But the first broker to that market owns that market. So that's something you want, and that's why we look at broker selection. And we would encourage people to look for a broker that understands your industry and understands your business. And I tell people, it's like It's like buying a car. I want the Z71 Suburban with the soccer mom package and the nav system and the whole works. And it's a $60,000 unit. And at dealer one, you get a Polaroid of you and your new truck and a t-shirt and a thank you very much and see you later. And at dealer two, you get 4 hours worth of training on how to use all that really cool stuff. And you get free oil changes and tire rotations for as long as you own the car. It's the exact same unit, $60,000. GM just wants to know, where do I drop it off, dealer one or dealer two? But those are the kind of things that you need to look at when shopping. Let's see. Okay, let's go back. Come on. These got out of order. Come on. Okay, the policy, people actually read the policy. So either you should read them or the person you're dealing with should be competent enough to read them, because there's stuff in there that really does mean something and can mean the difference between whether you get a claim paid and whether you don't. The 3 most pertinent sections of the policy are the conditions, the exclusions, and the definitions. Because the definition is not maybe what you think it is, it's what the policy says it is. And so that's important, because it is, at the end of the day, it's a contract. For example, the definition of pollutant means any solid, liquid, gas, thermal irritant, to paraphrase, any solid, liquid, or gas that acts as an irritant. I have an ex-wife that considers me a pollutant because I am a solid irritant, according to her. So I challenge people to find me a substance on this earth that would not fit that definition. God, years ago, chocolate syrup, Hershey, PA, tanker load of chocolate syrup, flip, tank ruptures, syrup goes into a canal that leads into a river, and there's a $500,000 fish kill. If it would have been $5 grand, it probably would have been no big deal. But for $500,000, the insurance company said, nope, that's a pollutant. Chocolate syrup, good on ice cream, bad on fish. So that's why those things are important. We did that. Okay, broker selection is key to use somebody that knows what they're talking about. It's my daughter having a little fun with her dad. Okay, that that doesn't work either. Okay, and we'll have questions later, right? Or do you want to do them now? Or?
Yeah, well, it's been so short. Let's do a few right now.
Okay. Any questions? We love insurance. We love writing those big checks.
I've been renting cars since 1979. I still don't know whether I should get insurance.
Yeah. Repeat.
I said I've been renting cars since 1979, and I still don't know whether to buy the insurance or whether it's covered by mine.
Use a credit card. My favorite is American Express because they pick up the CDW, the collision damage waiver. Still leaves the only thing not covered is loss of use, and Hertz or Enterprise is going to come tell you that while they were repairing their rental car, every other car in their fleet was gone, and they lost money from loss of use of re-renting that car that you put in the shop. The fun thing is when you get real aggressive with them and say, sure, prove to me that every single car in your fleet in this geographic area was rented at that time and you lost money. 99% of the time, it doesn't happen. That's the only, if you use a credit card that covers those, then you don't have to pay the extra, and your only risk is the loss of use, which I've never actually seen paid before. Okay. Insurance in any business, whether it's the corner sandwich shop or IBM or Sunoco, is one of the top 4 expenses that any company has. Therefore, we would like to think people would pay attention to it. And the insurance industry as a whole, really guilty. We haven't promoted ourselves to that point. And the sad thing is that insurance, you don't know that it's wrong most of the time until it's too late. So that's why we say go back to the broker selection process and work with people that know your industry. They know they know that a wrap is not something that comes out of your teenager's car. They know how to spell mass spec and GC. They know the difference between commercial and residential waste and what a one-arm bandit is versus a slinger and things like that. And so those are MSW versus C&D. And those are things that are become key, because if you don't know the industry, then are they really doing the right thing? And after a loss is not a good time to find out that it's not correct. More? God, so I just covered the whole thing.
I've got one for you, David. You've covered a bunch of them, but are there any other biggest mistakes that companies make trying to get insured that you see in the business?
One of the biggest mistakes we saw with workers' comp was not providing light duty. And even if you think you don't have light duty, if you consult with your broker or your carrier, they can find you light duty. I've seen them take your employee and send them to the Salvation Army or Goodwill. And the whole motivation there is you want to get away from the employee that thinks he's on vacation. And if he knows that he's got to go to Goodwill and move donations or hang clothes and all that, he'd probably rather be back working the forklift anyway. And so there are options for that. Taking advantage of the resources of the broker and the carrier can save you tons of money. I've seen companies that spend $20, $30, $40,000 a year on safety consultants when you can get that for free from your broker or your carrier. And so it's all those little things that will add up to move you into saving more money and being more competitive. And the experience mod is probably the biggest one that people run into, because it's your very own personal discount or can be your very own personal surcharge. And so having a culture of safety, preventing those losses in the first place, training employees well, having a culture of safety, things like employee safety manuals, your toolbox talks, vehicle maintenance programs, vehicle inspection programs. It's how simple it would be to check that truck out before it hits the road and has a blowout and runs into a telephone pole would be your best case scenario. You know, hits a car full of people, it's a really bad thing. So yes, ma'am.
So I worked several years for municipality and we were self-insured, right? So then we did light duty, but there were some restrictions on how many days we could allow them to do that before some other labor law kicked in. Are you familiar with that? Like then it could become an accommodation that you are providing that person and would have to change the job description and things of that nature. But I don't know if there are some self-insured differences versus those that have other policies.
Well, when you're self-insured, that usually the reality of that is that you normally have a huge deductible and you buy what's called reinsurance, because the city says I'll eat the first $1 million, but after that I'm not. And then you really want to have aggregate reinsurance, because how many times can you eat $1 million before it gets hurt? But one of the things we really encourage too are detailed job descriptions, including how much the job requires people to lift and do that, so that when you're dealing with the doctor, you can say this person has to lift 10 pounds 50 times a day and turn with it. You know, tell me when they can do that. And so those really help. And we have resources to help you do those things as well. And that's also one of the integrity testing is a huge deal. It's only about $15 per employee, and it'll tell you. It's one of those tests you may have taken. I mean, it asks you the same question, but slightly worded differently about 10 different times. And it'll tell whether somebody's likely to do drugs and or cheat or file a false work comp claim or any things of that nature. And for $15, you can avoid a $50,000 loss. But I know of no time limit restriction on light duty. But that's where you get back to claims management as well, where you want to stay on top of that claim and find out and communicate with the doctor and the employee and all that. The minute there's a loss, you want to touch out that you want to make that employee think that you're their best friend.
Well, and it got into where you can't do their regular position, so you're short, you can't replace that position. So there were just all sorts of things going on, I think.
Yeah, which is why we try not to have that loss in the first place. On the back.
Thanks. Can you talk about pitfalls associated with additional insured on your insurance? You know, when you've got to have additionally insured your
That's the 3
your
hours
client.
this afternoon. No,
And the other one secondary before I give this up is getting insurance for underground capital property, stuff that's underground.
Depending on the property, you're most likely going to insure that even though it's not moving around. The best place to put that's on a marine basis where you specifically schedule those things, because you've got a lot more flexibility with the valuation and the perils insured against, like underground tanks, foundations and footings, things of that nature. What was additional insured? If you're really bored, there's about 15 different additional insured endorsements, and our friends, the attorneys, love to play with those. Are we having attorneys in the room? Okay. Don't take this. I love attorneys that think they know everything about everything. And so they took one insurance course in law school, and they know all that. And they've asked for stuff that's just totally, it's not even insurable. There's only two reasons for something to be not insured. It's uninsurable, or it's better insured elsewhere. But the additional insured thing is usually just boils down to a fight between which endorsement they want, because additional insureds, sometimes the one endorsement stops at the completion of the job and there's no completed operations coverage for additional insureds. There's another one that includes completed operations, but do the carriers want to provide it? And it becomes a negotiating point. And the endorsements I've seen attorneys ask for additional insureds on auto policies where there was no such thing. But they wouldn't, I think Syntex has gotten their act together since then, though. But they were known throughout the insurance industry as the worst. And the real problem is, don't work until you have the insurance straightened out. Because there are people like our friend out of Texas that will let you work and then decide your insurance isn't correct, and they will withhold your payment. And I've had a roll-off guy take 3 containers of construction debris back to the site and give it back to them in a rather unruly manner. And then they got in trouble because it wasn't the exact debris that came off the site in the first place. So they were intentionally littering. But so those are the, things. There was some. Anyway, I'm around. My numbers, call me anytime. I know I'm actually a fun guy, but this is my job and I kind of geek over it. So I'd be glad to talk to you about it. More fun to talk over a beer anyway. So thank you guys very much.
Great job, David. And I second the motion that he's a fun guy. Our next topic is catastrophic fire prevention and control in waste and recycling industry. And our speaker is Ryan Fogelman. Vice President with Fire Rover LLC. Let's give him a warm Florida welcome.
A warm Florida welcome. Is that supposed to be like specific times of the year? Because right now it doesn't feel as warm.
Not today.
And by the way, David, thank you for hating all attorneys. I do as well. I got a law degree and an MBA. I never practiced a day. I don't like reading any contracts. So if you work with me, you know, I'm really, I like to stay out of the, the details, if that makes sense. So that's why I have good operators who do that for me. Today, I'm excited. We have Ronald Butler here as well. I've lovingly called him the lithium ion battery, the Jedi master of lithium ion batteries. I actually did an editorial in Waste 360 2 years ago, and I accidentally put it out. I would like to say that I did it on purpose, but I accidentally put it out in May, and it was May the 4th. And so like the Jedi master, it just exploded, right? No pun intended. You know, I think the name's starting to stick. He tells me that, you know, he gets a lot of heat, but, you know, seriously, he'll be talking about the Morris fire last Waste Expo, when we were all getting the first time we got away from our houses in a year. You know, there was a huge 200,000 pound lithium ion battery fire that I called Ron, and he was like, I'm on my way. So I'm excited to hear about the details. I hope you guys are as well. So to talk about today, we're going to talk about fires, right? We're going to talk about, you know, you have the insurance. Insurance is about risk mitigation. What I do is risk mitigation, right? And, you know, it's one of the things that when I got into the industry in 2015, 16, we had started Fire Rover. Frankly, we had no idea if it was going to work. You know, we were just dumb enough, smart enough, you know, we had a great team of inventors. One of my partners who has since passed away, he developed it. His name is Brad Gladstone. You know, and he was sitting at a scrap metal facility, and he was doing security, kind of always when you're in urban areas, keeping people out. And, you know, it was one of those days, you know, happenstance. He was talking to one of the owners who had literally just had a catastrophic loss. And he said, listen, if there's anything I can do, I'd love to help. And he said, next time, put the fire out. And Brad literally left there, called Jeremy, who's another partner, and Pete, and they put together the Fire Rover system, which, you know, we knew it worked, but, you know, knowing something works and proving something works takes a lot of time and a lot of learning and a lot of effort. Today, I'm happy to say we have 350 locations that we do currently. We're in 9 of the top 10 waste and recycling companies. We literally just finished our biggest, you know, our biggest installation, which was 48 cameras and 27 nozzles on a continuous flow system. And I'll get into that as well. So, you know, it's one of those things in the beginning. You know, I had so many folks from a fire engineering perspective who had been working in waste and recycling for years, and nothing against someone who's been working in the same industry for 30 to 40 years, but, you know, they're not going to look at it in a way that I needed to look at it, which was different. You know, and that's where I brought guys like Jim Emerson and Ron Butler and, you know, a bunch of other outside guys to say, you know, what is really going on here and what are we really seeing here? And so, you know, I do an annual report. I have a copy of it. I have, like, you know, a few here. You can get them on Amazon. But what ended up happening was I started tracking fires, because I was at my first paper show and I meet my first customer and I'm like, okay, you know, we got this Fire Rover system. We're going to save the world. Let's go. And I talked to this guy, it was Brent Shows, who was at Advanced Disposal, good friend now, but, you know, at the time didn't know me from Adam. And I explained our system as poorly as I possibly could, because I knew nothing at that point in time. And I go, what do you think of it? He's like, it's good. It's like, why do I need it? And I said, well, because you have fires. And he was like, do I? And I'm like, it was literally public knowledge at Advanced Disposal. It had 4 major like 4 catastrophic or 2 catastrophic and 2 smaller fires that year. I mean, they're public companies, so everything's public. And he goes, do I? And I'm like, yeah, you do. You had, like, it was like 3 or 4% of your top line revenue was affected. And he goes, we'll do my competitors. And again, that's what this all comes down to, right? Is that, sorry, I thought I had the wrong slide, but it really comes down to good operators have fires. Bad operators have more fires, right? So, you know, it's one of those things. To prove to the industry that we have an inherent risk of fire in what we do is something that, over the last 50 years, there's always been fires. The hazards right now, I mean, and I can get through some of the numbers, but about 50% of the fires that are caused at our waste and recycling facilities are happening because of lithium ion batteries. There's a number of different studies, a number of different surveys that can say that. But what I did was I left that show and I was like, I had to prove to Brent that there were fires, that something was going on. And I looked for data everywhere. There was no data. So I started just using Google Alerts and doing reported fires in waste and recycling in the US and Canada. And that's really what we've gotten here. And again, the first year I'm like baseline. I had no idea what we were even looking at. I had no idea if it made any sense. By the time we got to our second year and our third year, at the same time, there were a ton of lithium ion batteries that were, it was the symptom that we were hearing about. And everyone was starting to blame lithium ion batteries, right? Kind of the unknown. So in 2018, we hit a number and I was like, hey guys, it's going to crash. We're getting like, this is going to get bad. And it did. In 2018, across the globe, in Japan and in a lot of countries, and including in the US, we had a ton of fires. And the crazy thing is that, I assume that now I'm in 350 facilities, right? We're going to have less fires. Well, for a couple of years, they started to go down. And last year we had more fires than we've ever had. We beat 2018. So the last 2 months, we've had more fires in January and February of these 2 months than we've ever had in a 2-month period since I've been doing this since 2016. So if you're looking at the numbers, how does it work that I'm putting fires out? Like, I know we've never had a catastrophic loss in an area that we protect, right? So if you're looking at it from a risk mitigation, I know what I know, which is 350 facilities that are out of the 4,000 to 6,000 facilities. We don't, there's different numbers from EREF and some others, but really, why aren't fires going down when the industry as a whole has really been focused on fire safety, better operations, and all the other pieces? And really what it ties to is risk. So again, that's the January numbers, just to show you in 2002. I mean, we had more fires in January, February of this year than we've ever had. And we'll get into, so this is the numbers that, when I look at it, my idea was this: even if we have more fires, because of the hazards that are inherent in the risk of our system, if I can put out fires, because it's not about whether we have a fire, right? What's important is how do you react and what's the severity of a fire? And so, we've been getting into this across the board. Me, I put out a number across the pond, but again, if you look at, I know that I have a fire and I put them out. In the last year, we put out over 1,000 fires at our facilities. And again, we're growing, we're getting more and more of these facilities. So at some point in time, when we're protecting X number, I believe the numbers will start to go down. But the problem is that this hazard of lithium ion that Ron's going to get into a little bit more, I mean, it is not going away. It's compounding. It's a hockey stick. So I used to have graphs that would show, but honestly, we all know that lithium ion batteries cause a problem, and we all know that there's more and more of them. And I can tell you, if you look at the education programs and the EPR programs and all the different things, it's minuscule. I think Ron said it was 5% of lithium ion batteries, or actually Mike Campaign said yesterday, I think it's like 5% of lithium ion batteries actually get recycled properly. Where are the rest going? In landfills, in waste and recycling, or they're sitting somewhere in your house? How many of you guys have 15 like old phones sitting in your home? These all need to be recycled, and they all need to be recycled properly. I break out the number of fires in, by number, by total. Again, all this is inside my report. So if you feel like reading it, I mean, it's 60 pages, but it's not that long. You can get a copy of it. Just, send me an email. I'm happy to give you a card or link in with me, and we can go through it. But really what we're seeing is that, paper plastic is at 49% of our fires. And I consider paper, plastic, and waste in one. And the reason I do that, and I kind of break out metals and C&D and E-scrap, because the difference is this: when the consumer has the ability to change their behavior, that's really waste, recycling, and paper, right? There's education that can be done. When you're dealing with scrap metal or C&D, or you're dealing with, E-scrap, you can't really change the behavior of the product coming in. So again, you can do best practices and others, but if a car comes in and it starts getting shredded, and you get in a car accident, and you have one of your, like, how many Juul cigarettes and other, other products are literally sitting in the seats. You can only clean it so well before you're going to get that in a shredder. It goes into an ASR pile, starts a fire down the road. And again, takes one, right? We're talking billions and billions and billions of these batteries that are out in the market. I'm going to get into like showing videos, which is a lot more fun. So I'm kind of moving through this stuff if we don't mind. But just to give an idea, my numbers at 367 fires, I multiply that times 6 as a reasonable assumption, understanding that those 367 fires are typically 2 alarm, 3 alarm, 4 alarm, 5 alarm, 7 alarm, like they're the bigger fires. They're the ones that get reported in the media. I do not use any data of fires that I know outside of when I classify them as that. So if you look at like EREF, they did a phase and they're basically saying that with my numbers based on the 215 and 319, I mean, basically that my numbers are down 3.4 to 4.3 times from a conservative perspective of how many real fires we're having. How many fires get unreported? It happens way more than anyone would think. And it's really a line of your business. And again, having an inherent risk of fire in your industry is fine as long as you can attack it with technology or some other type of best practice. So one of the things that I think is nice, this is what Eunomia, they did a really big report around England and the MRFs and like all the different pieces. And there's 2 main things that came from this. One, 49% of their WTS, which is basically their equivalent of waste paper and plastic, we're at 49%, they're at 49%. Half our fires are happening in the same, in the same type of niche, right? Well, if you look at metal recycling, for some reason, 18% of their fires are in metal recycling. Ours is 36. Now, again, I don't know why, or, I mean, I've asked a lot of questions and I've asked a lot of people, but that's one of the things that was kind of glaring to me, which is really, why are we dealing with, or we're 32. So it's almost half the amount of fires. And again, it could be reporting, it could be a number of things. So to go quick, right? What's causing these fires? Traditional fire hazards, lithium ion batteries, hot and dry environments. We know that we get more fires in Florida during, winter versus summer. Just based on the dryness. We do like, we know during the summer we get a spike. We also know during fourth quarter, we typically get a retail spike. Inherent risk, sparks and hot works. We see this all the time. We actually sell a encapsulator agent that you can spray and use as a pre-treatment for, for hot works. Arson happens more often than you would think. And honestly, staffing has become, I mean, I just added that, a few months back because, having staffing, less amount of people, less amount of pre-sorting. So you can, the propane tank will sneak through and get into your metering and literally explode, or get into your shredders. So, there's just not enough people to do the jobs that we need to do. To really get into the amount of fires that Eunomia got into was really 50% of the fires that they've seen, 1 out of 2, when they really dug into it, was what we were looking at. So I know I'm moving through some of these quick. All this data is in the annual report. It goes by state. Okay, so consequences. This is more important. Yeah. So in Europe, what they believe the severity of a fire, they believe from the WISH standard that they've put out is that if you have a fire in a waste and recycling facility, that you've dealt with it and you're back to work in 4 hours, it's considered a successful incident. That's an issue, right? To me, I believe it's 10 minutes, right? And that's really what our solution does that's different. So if you look at like the length of disruption, because again, it's not about whether you have a fire. You have a small little fire, you put it out, not a problem. You can have thousands of those. Honestly, I mean, it's an issue, but it's not an issue until it's catastrophic. And what's David going to tell us? The minute it's catastrophic, it's over, right? I mean, trying to get insurance these days is very difficult. So really from a risk mitigation is the goal of what we do is to try to bring you back to the days well before lithium ion batteries, whether you're self-insuring or whether you're insuring yourself. But basically the severity of fires, huge, huge, huge piece. Now here's costs. In the UK, our equivalent for costs is all of the costs of these manufacturers. And this is where I talk about producer responsibility, is that the manufacturers, they put this product out to us, right? we as users want our iPhones to work. We want portable power. We are begging for it, right? So we're saying, give us all these different things that we can now run around with. I want it more powerful. I want it better. Well, we got what we want. So the manufacturers aren't doing a bad job. They're actually doing what we need and quenching our thirst for more power, right? But the problem is the cost to fight them, 90% are falling on the waste and recycling operators, which what that means is that's waste and recycling operators plus the insurance companies. This is why everybody's leaving. The real cost, and again, the rest are the fire professionals, which again, we have Ronald here, who's a chief for 30 years in Detroit firefighting. You know, he understands, I work with the guy, Andy Stearns, there is not enough training and there is not enough equipment. So what I've been pushing for is, if you're gonna bring money back from the producers, can't focus just on education. We have to focus on education, but we also have to focus on training of our firefighters. We need to focus on making sure that they have the right insurance options. And then we also need to make sure that they have the proper equipment to fight these types of fires, whether it's the operator and or the fire professionals. So the number is 1.2 billion a year in the US, right? We just heard there was there were 2 fires that were probably $70 million worth of damage in last week alone. So again, the 2.5 billion that we're having in fires is a big issue. And it's a big issue for a number of reasons, but the biggest reason it's a big issue is that we now don't have the capacity, and we're growing as an industry, or we're growing as a country, and it's proper infrastructure. You lose a MRF, and now every other MRF is now overloaded and they have more of a fire risk. This is death and injuries. You know, I'll go through this quickly. I mean, the sad thing about the injuries is that it's mostly firefighters, right? This is not our employees, which is the good thing, right? But it's mostly the firefighters who are fighting these fires, and they have the injuries. And then, you know, we have 2 deaths a year, right? And, you know, I can share those as well, and they're shared in the annual report. Just to get into, you know, everyone's saying from an insurance perspective, you know, they're leaving the market at a rapid pace. So this was from Nathan Brainerd. This was in 2018 when I was talking about, you know, the wave of lithium ion batteries. It was the first time we really got hit. You can see those are the actual claims data from the top 5 insurers. And it was shredders, lithium ion batteries had their spike, right? So again, this isn't like we're saying, hey, we have an issue. I mean, it's all proven. 7 years ago when I started doing this, it wasn't. So I was out there really trying to justify my numbers and trying to justify that we were really having a problem. You know, now, I mean, it's pretty well documented. So really at the end of the day, the goal is this. And again, this really gets into that insurance piece is, what do we need to do to mitigate our risk? What do you do as an operator? And then what do we have to do as an industry? And so I know David and the good brokers, even though he made fun of lawyers, you know, I'm going to say that all brokers are great. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. It's on video. But you know, the issue is this, it's really about risk mitigation. Good operator, you got to be a good operator, and you got to have your fire professionals. They have to be well-trained. They have to have the right tools. And a lot of that is the communication between you and your fire professional. They're going to feel better coming to your site when they know how to get in, right? When they know how to get in at 2 in the morning, when they know that you paid for a CAF system that's sitting there waiting for them, that, you know, they can do 2 things and or turn 2 nozzles and start spraying and putting a fire out, and it stops their guys from getting hurt. In lithium ion batteries, we've developed a solution through Rover that we do for some of the automotive OEMs, where it's literally a lithium ion battery solution where the firefighters have to take a defensive approach. So we put a quick connect on the back, we spray, and then right at the end, like the fire department, when they arrive, they can actually connect, and we can continuously spray for as long as we need to without the firefighters ever having to walk in the buildings. So the Morris fire, we're going to talk about that. We actually cover a couple in that area. Obviously that one, there was a number of reasons why it was not kind of on the up and up, but you know, really the idea again is you need to have solutions where the insurance companies, they can mitigate the portfolio risk, where they're not looking just at you, they're looking at the portfolio and saying, I don't want to be in this industry, right? Like I can't make any money. And again, that's why they're here. And again, operators can always get something, but it's the question, are they getting the right, you know, the right type? So really, when we focus on fires, it's prevention versus professional response. And what I was telling you guys before, that internal response is that first 10 minutes. I'm doing everything I can to catch a fire before it starts. And when I do, the idea is like, I can have a fire in incipient, and we call it in pre-incipient stage, is where I'm catching preemptive maintenance. I'm catching fires before there's flames in ASR piles. We're catching them in metering drums. We're catching them in a lot of places. But even if it does flame, I want to be able to put it out and eliminate it before you have a catastrophic loss, and your guys can go back to work. So really, what we developed is the Fire Rover solution. If you've never seen it, it's a big red box. Brad was, like to bring attention to what he was doing, which again, it's good and it's bad. It's good because we're putting fires out, knock on wood. If we don't, there's still a big red box on site. So basically it's a 20 by 8 by 8 container. It uses internet and electricity. It's completely self-contained and it's dry. So this thing goes in we have it as in Calgary, we have it all the way down in, the desert. We have a number in the deserts. It's heated, it's cooled. And what ends up happening is that, and this is where we'll get to videos, and I'm not going to say it's the greatest videos, but let's see, there we go. Okay, so this is our encapsulator agent that we use. It's an environmentally friendly wetting agent, no PFAS. We literally in 2016, we changed to not use any foams that had PFAS in it. So, I mean, this is really the unit working. And let me kind of walk you through this. Is it going to play? Success. Oh, no. Oh, it's playing?
Yeah, it's playing. Success. It's not now. Go ahead, hit play.
There we go. It looks like it's moving. No?
Go backwards, go forward. Go backwards more. There you go.
There it goes. Okay, so this is a normal tip floor. You see it, we can see through heat, we can see through darkness. There's a fire that actually started in their metering drum, and then there's another fire that started over. So what's happening is that we see it, the employees evacuate like they should, right? We have a Fire Rover agent who is in another state. They're in, they're looking at it, they're verifying. Once they see that it's a fire, they call the fire department, they call the guys on site, and then they actually charge the unit, and they're using a joystick, and they're literally applying our environmentally friendly cooling agent to both those fires. So you'll see, here's like the other angle. Whenever I say I'm using a camera, typically it's 3 cameras. We have nozzle cam and we have like a depth cam. And again, we're putting this fire out before anything happens, right? The fire department gets there, they arrive on scene, they say, hey, everything's good. These guys go back to work, there's no damage. We do this 1,000 times a year. Now, again, the question becomes, and it's getting more and more. I mean, last year we've added probably 150 locations in the last 12 months, and it'll be, I mean, my gut tells me that we'll probably be at 250 over the next 12 months. This is what, let me get you to like a lithium ion battery. This is a really good example, if I can get it to play. There we go. So this will see the metering drum. Again, this will actually, if it doesn't cause a fire, we'll shut this down, call the, call the site, and they'll basically take out whatever obstructions inside the metering drum. Okay. So then on 2, we also have another camera that's strategically located on the conveyor. If it starts a fire, it shuts down all the conveyors. And then we're literally, as we see that, we come back and then we'll spray these. So, I mean, I can give you a ton of these videos. A lot of them are on YouTube. So, this was a hot load that somebody dumped right on. Actually, this was a deep-seated fire. So, I mean, there's a ton of these videos, right? And again, the beauty of what we do, we can actually see where the fires start. They can get bad quick. I mean, depending. So this right here is lithium ion batteries. So this was accidentally dropped off at one of my customers' location. They dumped half of it onto the tip floor, and then they brought it outside. The truck was on fire. And again, this caused probably 6-7 fires over a 1-week period inside my customer's transfer station because they couldn't get these button batteries all up. They fell in cracks, they fell everywhere. And again, they kept driving on them. So like, here's a good example of a typical, a lot of these are small fires, right? We catch it, we see it, we spray it, everyone knows about it. I hear all the time that people will say that, we catch these in the middle of the night, or that there's only fires, we have a guy watching during the day. The answer is, Most of the time, these fires happen during the day, and a lot of times we catch them where no one sees them. So someone's on lunch, it's a blind spot. Let me get to, so we just developed for landfills a product called the On Watch, which is a, let me show you guys that video. So basically it's a trailer that I'm going to have at Waste Expo. We're also going to have on site at ISRI. And so what it is it's basically a trailer that is wind powered, solar powered, and it will follow the landfill facing. So it moves and then it's movable. So it works for construction and demolition, for wildfires. But it is a, there you go. So that unit will have it, if anyone's going to be at those two shows, we'll have it on site. But we piloted it a year ago. It's done really well. We've also done a continuous flow systems and lithium ion battery specific operations. And we're doing a refinery, we're doing others. So I think really what's most important to say is that the entire fire industry, and Ron can speak for this, they've really moved from a water-based approach to how do you detect something early, and how do you spray it and put it out early and deal with it, stop it in its tracks. Having a fire is not acceptable anymore. Putting 150,000 tons of water or gallons of water onto a fire, it's not acceptable because of all of the environmental issues, the PFAS issues, everything that goes with it. You need to catch these fires and catch them early. And that's really one of the things that, that we're really doing. And the waste and recycling industry has been on the forefront of this type of technology. Again, we have a patent. We've been blessed by working with everyone, and hopefully we're going to turn the tide and stop having as many fires as we've had. Good.
Got time for a quick question? I've got a quick question. Is the risk of fires directly related to facility size and/or type?
No. I mean, I think what we're going to see is that the risk is more based on where you get your product from. So I know there's been some operators that have gone and done education per streets because they're seeing a lot of contamination, whether it's lithium or anything else. And, when they educate those streets, they're actually seeing some positive effects on those. So, it is one of those things that a lot of times it's your area. Sometimes you get really good recycling. Sometimes you get, really bad depending on where you are. So, again, I don't think based on size and it's important, but I mean, I will say for our customers, we are definitely from a business continuity perspective, we are doing we're doing the biggest MRFs first, right? Because it's really a revenue question. If I'm getting 3% of my revenue out of one location, I'm protecting that one. No, it's awesome. You guys, I'm looking forward to Ron. So thank you.
All right. Our next presentation is a case study revisiting the Morris, Illinois battery warehouse fire, addressing mitigation, response, and business continuity strategies for the recycling industries. And a warm welcome for Ron, Jedi Master Butler. He's CEO of the Energy Storage Safety Products International. Ron.
Thank you. Thank you. And I thought, Ryan, I thought I was a big nerd about this stuff, man. You are a nerd. And that is a good, yes, and that is a good thing. Bear with me while I pull this up. Okay.
You're the GOAT.
The goat. The goat. I don't know about that. Okay. Thanks for having me. I call Ryan a nerd, but we need nerds. The data sets that he brings to bear are absolutely critical for your protection, to make sure your businesses stay in business. We existed for a long time without those data sets. And unless we can go to the numbers and show why we need solutions, services, products, and technologies process. Unless we can refer to numbers, no one's going to buy these things. No one's going to protect themselves. Insurance costs go up. And that's where my question to you, David, will ultimately come. What are your thoughts? I think we can get to this as we move forward in the question and answer. What are your thoughts relative to lithium ion fires in particular and the insurance underwriting pressures that are coming to bear? So if you could give that some consideration, we can come back to it. I appreciate it. But I'm here to talk about a specific event. So I'm gonna do a little bit of storytelling. I hate podiums. I would rather walk amongst you, but that's not going to be feasible today. We're going to talk about the Morris battery fire. How many folks in here heard about the battery warehouse fire that took place in Morris, Illinois last year? It would have been the end of June, beginning of July. Nobody? I see 1, 2. There's a couple people in here. Well, it was a sea change event. And what I mean by that is heads remain in the sand, whether it's automotive OEMs, whether it's their tier suppliers, whether it's recyclers and their ilk. Heads remain in the sand. We avoid the problems as long as we can. Why? Because they can tend to be very expensive. I have to address this. I don't want to pay for new technologies. I don't want to pay to train my employees, very key, training your employees. I don't want to do these things. But this fire in particular showed why we have to. So before I run this video, and I'll give you a little bit of background on how this happened. Took place June 29th of last year. Before that, I'd like to bring to your attention a couple of other events. Now, these happen on a weekly basis. They might happen on a daily basis, but I would challenge the 6X underreporting. I think it's much higher than that. I think that the underreporting, either conscious or otherwise, I don't want to tell the firefighters to come to my facility, because when the firefighters come to my facility, others know. When others know, the insurance underwriter knows. When the insurance underwriter knows, what happens to my costs? They go up. So we try to keep it to a minimum. I understand that. But the other thing I would challenge my friend Ryan on is no such thing as a small fire. Small fires turn into what? Big fires. That's always how it happens. It's physics. So we have to make sure that we understand that going in. The image to the far right took place just outside of Detroit. New batteries being shipped from an unidentified automotive OEM. We'll keep it identified. I'll just give you a hint. The first letter in the company's name is a G, and the second letter in the company's name is an M. That'll give you a little bit of information on who was shipping the batteries. Brand new battery commodity, shipped as it should be, per rule, 30% state of charge. When we say state of charge, how much energy is inside of the battery? So 30% state of charge is acceptable. It's not proven. There's no data really to show that that's why we ship it that way, but it's allowed. Brand new on the freeway during what's called the battery show in Novi, Michigan. You cannot make this stuff up, Ray. We're in the battery show. Someone comes to me, Todd McIntosh from General Motors, says, Ron, there's a fire outside. No idea. We all walk outside. We could see the plume of smoke coming from I-275, and it was this vehicle containing brand new modules for EVs. Second, you might have heard about this one a couple of weeks ago. Felicity Ace. It's at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean right now. Shipping 4,200, mostly owned by the Volkswagen Group. There again, I throw another company under the bus. Mostly owned by the Volkswagen Group, shipping electric vehicles with batteries in tow, batteries encased. Separating them would have been smart, but we're just now learning those lessons. But the first inclination from lay folk is to say what caused the fire. What do you think? The batteries in the cars. We can't prove that. We'll probably never prove that because it's at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. $500 million, or in other words, $500 million worth of commodity loss, and the ship itself, which is probably about $150 million. It all starts with one battery, which starts from one module, battery, big battery, broken down into modules, broken down into individual components called cells. That's generally what causes MRF fires, the cell. It all starts with that one cell. The last image is out of Houston, Texas, where they're removing batteries for recycling by rail. The car exploded, broke windows about half a mile away. Fortunately, no one was hurt in any of these events, but that time is coming too. Here's a video of the Moreau. I told you I'd do a little bit of storytelling. So they called me at 5 o'clock in the morning. Hey, are you Ron Butler? Some guy named you the Jedi Master. You must be a real clown. Yes, I am. I like to have fun. We have a fire in Morris, Illinois, about an hour southwest, of Chicago. And it involves a battery warehouse. Can you come out here? We'll send the Illinois State Police helicopter to come get you. I'm not getting in anyone's helicopter, so I'll drive. About 4 hours later, I get there. It looks like this. What we did was we ascertained that the building was about 200 by 300 feet, full of batteries, about just south of 200 tons. 200 tons, I thought, would be a lot bigger. I've seen Amazon warehouses full of batteries. I've seen General Motors Supply warehouse, LG Chem, full of batteries. I've seen lots of batteries. 200 tons was not a lot. We saw the black and white smoke trending towards gray. It means that there's an active fire burn and that lithium ion was involved. When I got out of my car after the 4-hour drive, the first thing I smelled from about 3 blocks away was juicy fruit. I'm an old guy. Does anybody remember juicy fruit gum? I know the young people in here don't, but juicy fruit gum. That's what it smells like when lithium ion batteries burn, or lithium. And I'll digress for just a second. Does anybody know the difference between a lithium and a lithium ion battery? Simple. Lithium cannot be recharged and is composed of lithium metal, a class D combustible that you cannot extinguish with water. You can, but I wouldn't advise it. It reacts when you put water on it. Lithium ion, on the other hand, is rechargeable. Lithium ion recharge, and you find that in your laptops, in your cell phones. See, I'm old. I call it a cell phone. It's a mobile device. Those are rechargeable lithium ion batteries. You treat them differently, and they are different. We arrive on scene. We find that they've already started forward fire response operations. We wound up taking a local police department drone and tasking it to fly through, and I'll show you some video of the inside of the facility in just a moment, to fly through and around the facility to stage and to get a better sense of how firefighters were going to go in. Well, we found that firefighters had already been in. They go into the building, they hear popping noises, they hear clicking. There are things flying around. Well, those are the cells. They're shrapnel, because once they heat, they become fireworks. They back out, they being the firefighters. On the way there, they say, Ron, how do we get this fire under control? We just evacuated 16 square miles of neighborhood right before the 4th of July weekend. The mayor is up in arms. The state is going crazy. EPA is on scene, both federal and local and Region 5. They're all on scene. US DOT is on scene. The governor is having a hissy fit. How do we get this under control? Well, before I could give them the proper response, they had already dumped what we call Purple K. I'll show you a video of that just now. So you can see, I'm gonna step away from Mike. I got a big enough mouth. See the purple stuff? Purple K. It's what we use in aircraft fires, oil refinery fires. They're very good for that purpose. Not so much for this. Didn't work. So what else do we do? Or did they do? Well, they sit right in the middle of the country's largest nuclear plant spread, 3 nuclear plants. And what they're charged to do if there's a failure in a reactor is cover it with cement, because that encases the radioactive material. So what they do, we don't know what else to do. Let's dump cement on it. What you see here, the tan stuff, is a mixture of the burned battery components and Portland cement. I don't blame the fire service because they didn't know what to do. They were trying to figure out what to. By the time I got there and said, you could have used water, they had already gone through this process. So they set up an emergency response operations center, and this is what can happen. At some point, I'm going to drag all this back to your concerns. This is what happens, and this is what Ryan did a really, really good job of getting to. Your risk goes beyond what you think it does. The lithium ion battery or lithium battery in your facility that ignites is just the kindling. It's the beginning. And there's everything else that spreads and destroys your business, drives up insurance underwriting costs, potentially injures your people or firefighters. Firefighters did go in. We did an interview with 2 of the firefighters that reported some breathing problems afterwards. They're fine now. We have not started cleanup on this environment just yet. You'll notice as we run through this video that on the far, what we call, if you're walking into a building, just a little bit of fire service speak. You're walking into the building. The front of the building is what we call the A side. To the left is the B side. To the rear is the C side, so that makes the right what? The D side. Walking into this building, you're looking at the D side. There are materials burned on this side. And as we task the drone to fly through, you'll notice that there's lots of unburned material between the D side and the B side. How'd this happen? Because there's burned material on the B side and the D side. Well, what we found out, well, the first thing they thought is that the owner was an irrational player, nefarious. He set this on fire himself to collect some insurance. Problem number 1, he was not insured. So how do we show that this could have happened naturally? And we'll talk a little bit about what happened to him. Chinese national citizen doing very good work. Very high quality batteries, by the way. These were not recycled material. These were high quality batteries. So if it happens with those, it can absolutely happen in the recycling environment. So as you see, these are all burned stuff. I agree. Burned stuff on one side of the building, but everything in between is unaffected. How'd that happen? Well, the fire started on the A side. What we think is what happened is it spread across the roof joists with wiring, plastic wiring, dropped down on the other side. And what do you notice about packaging? What stands out about packaging to you? Don't be afraid. It's clean. What about the material? Plastics, what else? I heard wood over here. Paper and wood, we call those common combustibles. They burn easily. So the material, we think, burned its way across the roof and dropped down on the other end. The other plausible explanation is that I described the 18650 cell or the cell as a firework. What could have happened was they ignited on one side, shot across 300 feet, ignited material on the other side. So now we're getting into what did we learn from this? Well, we learned that common combustible packaging is a no-no, and all your batteries are allowed to be shipped in common combustible packaging. Inside of your MRF, what does it come in? A box, a cardboard box? It's starting not to make sense. And now we're starting to make sense of it. To finish up what happened on the scene, and I went back recently, and we're looking at not beginning cleanup until the middle of next month. It's been almost a year. Here's some of the materials you can see that we still consider this unaffected because this was soot impregnated, that's all. There's soot on it, but it didn't burn. It didn't contribute to the fire in any real active way. So this was bypassed or jumped. So I like this video one for just a couple of seconds. And remember, we did this with a drone. What we also did was took some decent hydrofluoric acid, a gas family, HF, is what's really threatening to people because it's absorbed through your skin. And even from a firefighter's perspective, we're not protected from that because our skin is exposed at some point. We found that there were spikes early on, but they dropped after a while. And that's where EPA was really, really concerned. What we, and I'll move through this video. What we ultimately did was we took we call this a stick. You'll see these on the back of fire trucks. Please don't call it a fire engine. It's a fire truck. We extended the stick and we dropped water on it. Well, the EPA was concerned with water runoff. We don't know the toxic elements inside these burned batteries. So they ordered a 6 foot by 6 foot moat dug around the building to capture any water runoff because the LaSalle River was not too far off. So downstream, physically and otherwise, risks were real. Keeping in mind that I think the chief Steffes, the chief of the fire department there, did regular briefings with the media. I'm surprised no one knew about this. Did regular briefings with the national media every 3 hours for a week. You can see the river in the background. That's the river they were worried about. The smoke's blowing in the easterly direction. This is again the last of the drone footage. You can see the white has turned from gray to smoke has turned from gray to white, meaning we have some semblance of control over the fire. But that's not the big issue. The big issue is this was a non-insured player. This was a small operation. This was between 100 and 200 tons of battery, brand new commodities. All of those kind of add up to this is a problem. Now, I don't want to be the lithium ion naysayer. I am asked all the time, you're the guy, lithium ion guy. Would you put your children in an electric vehicle? Well, the answer without hesitation is absolutely. Without question. We're even getting some indications that have, when we get to the point where the number of internal combustion engines, gasoline, et cetera, are commensurate with the same as the amount of EVs on the road, we still expect EVs to be safer. The risk really comes with now these batteries have been used and abused. We don't know what they've been put through, what paces, thrown around, dropped, run through with forklifts. We don't know what state of health they're in. But when they wind up in your MRF or your recycling environment, you can expect they're in the worst possible state of health. So the opportunity for failure has increased dramatically. That's why I'm surprised. I know you're really conservative with those numbers, but I'm surprised that we're not into the teens to early 20s. The 6X is just, that's because it goes unreported. The only way we're going to report is the Felicity Ace ship that I showed you. They have no choice but to report because everyone knows about it, right? This is what we did some infrared. I won't bore you with another fly through, but we tasked the drone to look for hot spots or burning batteries. We saw hot spots upwards of 6 weeks later. So batteries will continue to burn. We weren't going to send firefighters in there because we didn't know the toxic gas profile. We didn't know what we were exposing them to. So we had to be very careful. In retrospect, what the firefighters did, the city of Morris and LaSalle, was brilliant. They worked with nothing. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. Last year, there was an explosion in Calhoun County. Anybody from Georgia? Calhoun County, Georgia, where firefighters were hurt when an ISO container containing lithium ion batteries exploded as they approached it. And this is happening way too frequently. Very quickly, just to show you that battery is a battery is a battery to a certain degree. This is a fire that took place 2 weeks after the Morris fire. 2 weeks. The chief from Morris, while responding, I could hear the sirens in the background. Said, Ron, you're not going to believe this. I'm on my way to LaSalle, which is about 25 miles west of Morris. We have a fire in an energy storage container outside of Braidwood Nuclear Facility. And they called him because he just 2 weeks ago became the only chief in the country, basically, that had experience with dealing with these things. So just 2 weeks, and it happened. And these are all brand new batteries. So if they can happen with brand new batteries, they'll happen with used batteries in a MRF, for example. You know, the positives and negatives of the firefighter response. Some of the fire codes will change for you. In the 2024 International Fire Code, they already addressed your concerns. So I would absolutely become familiar with the International Fire Code, which is the dominant fire code in the United States. If not, NFPA has Fire Code 1, which hasn't even addressed batteries yet. I'm curious about the insurance underwriting issues. I heard a person represents one of the largest insurers in the world the other day tell me they're getting to the point where they're not going to underwrite lithium ion or battery facing activities. So does that mean electric vehicle production, logistics, recycling? They just think it's too expensive, too risky. The authorities having jurisdiction, the insurance underwriters, the fire marshals, they're getting more, they're getting clearer on the code language and what they should be doing about these issues. So you need to find a way to interact with them on a regular basis so they understand what you do and they can understand specifically from this perspective. When the fire service responds to your facility, the first thing they're going to do is ask a lot of questions. We think of firefighters as these people that are going and do whatever, whenever. That's not always the case. They have families too. They want to get home. So they're going to ask you, what's in this facility? What's burning? And what happens while you're answering all those questions? Your facility is burning to the ground. So walk through these things, we call them walkthroughs, with your local fire department beforehand. They probably don't know a lot about how to deal with it. They would appreciate buying pizza or something, I don't know. Some of the lessons learned very quickly. The cleanup's not yet underway. We're learning what fire suppression does, how to use it, what suppressants work and what suppressants don't work. Water's always a good default, but we have to be careful about runoff. Definitely don't use it on lithium batteries. The problem is you're probably going to have a mixed bag. So do I use water or not becomes the question. Flash code changes are in place and coming to term in California and Illinois, specifically because of Morris. Flash code changes means I'm not waiting till the 2024 code cycle begins. I'm adopting these tomorrow. What does that mean for you is a question you might want to ask. So there's a couple of committees that work on some of these issues. Some of our research partners, we've been funded by the US DOT. It's a little bit about our company to build specialized battery transport and containment systems. We've gone through SBIR phase 1 and phase 2 with great success. We partnered with the University of Michigan, Go Blue, and with the University of Texas at Austin, Hook'em Horns, and we do very good work with them, I believe. We're also an Underwriters Laboratories partner on test and training development, and an NFPA partner on training development solely. Containment and control. If you leave with nothing from me, find a place to put your batteries if you can. But imagine that putting batteries in an enclosed environment just creates other hazards. So just quickly, this is what we do. We did for we call it the BLISS. So it's a battery logistics integrated safety system. We designed this for automotive in particular. So you can see we're moving automotive battery packs. DOT funded us to do this in 2 phases. DOD, Department of Defense, US Navy in particular, might take this over for additional phases. What we can do is contain batteries, monitor them at all times. We know when they fail. Control toxic gases when they evolve, when they're burning, when the batteries are burning. Notify. So there's a chirp on the outside of the box and there's a strobe to let people know in your environment that there's a fire underway or a failure underway. It's not always a fire. And then communicate that to an interested third party, just like Fire Rover does. Great technology, great approach. I want someone else to know, get the fire department rolling, etc. The other thing that we've done on the left-hand side is what we call a man carry box for the United States Navy, where we're moving batteries to and from theater inside a controlled environment. It has all the same features. And the concluding slide is some of the things we're doing, some of our partners, both in development and build. We're very proud of our partnerships. We cannot survive without partnerships. We are a small company with big hearts and big ideas. And we're able to take those big ideas to fruition because of our arrangement with the federal government and some of our academic partners. Some of the things that I think are important is collaboration, design of sustainable packaging. Where do you put your batteries? Do you need to be shown that? How to train your employees. We do that as well. And then engage with our partners to, we get a really good look at what coming codes and standards look like. We call it seeing around corners. We can see around corners a bit. I know what the code for 2024 looks like in detail a year before everyone else does. Not because I'm some Jedi. Did you know that Jedi are real?
Yeah, I did. You're one of them. but
No.
You're a guy who won't get, or you're safer in EV car, but no helicopters.
No, I'm not getting it. Foot first in the helicopter. You can skip that. And then leadership. So we have developed a safety center of excellence for battery safety, where we work with National Auto Dealers Association and others on preparing their employees for risk issues and providing them safe storage for batteries. Any questions, or did you want to save it for question and answer? Now, please.
We're there.
We're there.
Yeah.
Oh, ask a question. I can't wait to see how these hands go up. Yeah.
Hang on for the mic.
We got more questions than that.
One question that I get a lot that hadn't been asked yet, but is about Fire Rover specifically, is if I install a Fire Rover system, am I going to get a discount? And the answer is yes and no. Your discount's going to be when your losses go down because of taking preemptive action such as that. So that's something I was going to share and I forgot at the time, but it's part of staying at the bottom of that industry curve.
Yeah, and I can say just based on that, I mean, you know, I'm having a ton of different conversations. I mean, we're being brought into France through an insurance, like one of the large reinsurers there. So, you know, it's one of those things. I mean, of course, from a prescriptive perspective, they're going to look at you yourself, what it looks like. Do they want to be in the industry? But I mean, I do know there's, you know, little by little as we prove ourselves, it's, you know, it's getting more and more prevalent to offer. I don't know if it's offering discounts per se, but I mean, it's definitely putting our customers in a better shot from a risk mitigation perspective.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I had a question. I'm wondering if with these OEMs, you know, as EV makers, you know, they're increasing energy density, trying to increase range on these vehicles. Has there been any consideration about integrating chemical agents into the battery packs to suppress fire at the cell level before it gets bigger than that?
It's a great question. So you're talking about impregnating it's a blend of active and passive, what we call active and passive fire suppression approaches. They've tried that. They've tried looking into making different types of internal materials, both liquid and otherwise, that are not, there's nothing that's fireproof, nothing. Don't let anybody ever tell you there's something that's fireproof. Nothing's fireproof. But to my knowledge, there's research being done, nothing that they've been successful in. There's a scale that I think is always has to be considered. And I think that's a great question because it leads us into the promise of solid state batteries. They'll tell you, read an article, new article, they're so far away from it becoming reality. We're looking at a decade or more if it is successful. The other problem becomes that with solid state, you're basically transitioning from a lithium ion battery to a lithium battery. So now the only thing that really changes is there's considerable, you diminish the risk, but when they fail, they will still fail catastrophically.
Yeah.
I won't use a water-based fire suppressant in that case because I'm not applying water to a combustible metal fire, class D. But the risk really, though the risk drops, the end of the day, the outcome stays the same. But to answer your question directly, they're working on those things. That's a stretch because now you want them to reinvent their wheel.
Yeah.
But they're just not going to do it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You said that they're not cleaning up yet. They haven't started.
Oh, Ed Morris. No.
Yeah. What's going to be the mitigation area And I'm thinking about the smoke, the plume, beyond the building.
I confessed I'm a nerd, and we don't have time for me to really dig into the nerd stuff. But what I will say is this. We've done toxicology studies that show that for most intents and purposes, aside from the HF gas I mentioned, which is an acute right now issue, aside from the HF gas generation or acid, depending on whether you've applied water to it, burning batteries tend to be innocuous from a water runoff perspective, meaning that if I have an electric vehicle burning in the middle of the road, I use water to knock out the fire, and it runs into a local collection and cleanup system. That system should be able to do the trick. So I'm not expecting downstream, not physically, but downstream issues of high magnitude. Now, that does not mean to say that there are not some toxicology issues. There was a fire in a Rivian plant. There I go again, throwing companies under the bus. There's a fire in a Rivian plant in Southern Illinois. Their second one in 2 months, about 3 weeks ago. Car hoisted above for battery installation, and it decides to burn. There's no hook or crook to it. So the fire department comes in, I knock out that fire, am I done? That becomes the question. And it depends on who you're asking. If you're asking EPA, EPA is telling you, no way are you done. I have toxicology studies. I have people to protect. I have communities to protect. We've got to look into this thing. And that's where you guys, dragging you guys back into it. It's, the small fire thing. Yeah, they're physically small, but they always grow into something bigger unless you have a system to control it. So we do the same thing with those types of toxicology studies, developing out the long-term risk issues. We just don't know. But for most intents and purposes, you can flush it down a sewer. And if you come from a large municipal water cleaning system, it should be able to handle it. I can't wait to see the next.
All right, last question.
Thank you. I'm curious, the topic of hot loads is very scary, and maybe this is a question more for Ryan. But are there, do you anticipate advances on intercepting and minimizing the hot load issue? Like, does Fire Rover have plans for mini rovers on the collection fleet?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're dealing with, the problem that you're dealing with is the same thing Ron's dealing with, right? I mean, I have to have 100% connectivity, right? So the minute that it's in a car somewhere, that you're not going to have 100% connectivity. So that's really the big issue. I think you're seeing deluge systems that are being created for the hot loads, right? Where, they can basically, I'll use Ron's term, impregnate, right? But basically impregnate the load. We have a ton that fall onto our tip floors, right? And again, we actually ask them to. So, there's another municipality in Ohio that, when there's fires, they'll act as triage, right? Like they basically say, bring your fires to us, we'll put them out for you. Which is something that in theory we can do, but it's also dangerous, right? Now, do you want to drop it in the middle of the street, or do you want to drop it in a controlled environment where we think we can actually do something? And, some of our customers have gone down that path. Again, from an innovation perspective, I think there's always innovation, right? It's, so I would hope that they could figure out a way to basically fill up the, the trucks and their loads, right, before they get to us. But for, one of the things we do a lot of fleet protection where, so if you have your trucks that are half full at night and they put them into a row, we can do thermal trending on those and at least catch that first one. And one of the things that's really important, and everybody talks about these AI systems, but really, like, FM has classified us as the first smart monitor. And the reason I say this is that, it's really not about catching that one fire. It's about catching that fire before you have the domino effect or the chain effect. So if I can catch a heat abnormality on a truck, then guess what? I just saved 12 other trucks, which is, 350,000 a piece. And, you just saved, $5 million worth of equipment. It's the same thing with lithium ion batteries. You know, from an AI perspective, a lot of companies are out there in Europe, and this is why we're being brought into Europe. But like, they're basically saying, hey, I can come in and I can spray that fire. Well, it's not about that, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not the fire that you're spraying. It's the fire you're spraying. It's the people that are trying to fight the fire that you don't want to hurt. It's the collateral assets that you have to spray. So what Ron was showing in our large lithium ion battery operations, we're actually not spraying the fire, right? We are, but we're also spraying that pallet that might be, you know, that might be cardboard. And if you have an ember that comes or it gets hot enough, it's going to start another domino. So we spray that domino. We spray a ton of buildings when it's an outdoor fire. So an ASR pile, I'm spraying the building. We have one rubber fire we put out. We spray the entire building. So really, it's how do you create that ability for you to think and really, you know, and have human interaction during the firefighting process. And that's one of the things that there's no other systems out there that are doing it. And I would love to say that I'd put it on a truck, because we've been asked on trucks, trains, boats, everything. And it's just, it's one of those, besides the deluge side where it would just like expand. I really think that's probably the only technology that I know of. I mean, I hope that answered the question.
Okay, let's give Ron, David, and Ryan a great round of applause for a fantastic session. We're on break for the next half hour in the exhibit hall. And just a reminder, that's going to be the last time that you're going to have an opportunity to mingle with the exhibitors. They'll be breaking down